when a black belt jokingly challenged a quiet woman to spar. What unfolded next left the entire gym frozen in stunned silence. It was a harsh reminder that the softest voices often carry the fiercest truths, and Tyler Garrison was about to learn why you never underestimate someone based on appearances. Rebecca Thompson stepped into Master Kim's martial arts academy, her footsteps light, her old sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished wooden floor. The air inside was thick with the familiar scent of sweat and discipline, a blend she had grown to recognize during the months her daughter trained here. Her eyes scanned the blue mats until they landed on 16-year-old Chloe, who looked up and waved with a smile. "Mom's here!" Chloe called out, breaking briefly from the practice formation she was in with a few other teens. Rebecca smiled, brushing a strand of silver-tinged hair behind her ear as she made her way to a bench near the viewing area. At 38, she was content with her appearance. No makeup, a faded gray t-shirt, and soft, well-worn sweatpants. Life had taught her that strength and beauty had little to do with what you wore or how you looked. "Take your time, sweetheart," she said as she sat down, pulling out her phone to check emails while Chloe wrapped up class. Across the room, loud, crisp commands echoed through the space. Tyler Garrison, the academy's head instructor, was leading an advanced group through drills with his usual blend of intensity and ego. His black belt stood out starkly against his immaculate white GI, and every move he made seemed designed to remind everyone of his authority. "Higher kicks, Jenkins! My grandmother could do better than that!" he barked at one teen, who flushed and tried harder, as a few nervous laughs rippled through the group. Rebecca watched silently, studying his form. His technique was sharp, efficient, clearly trained, but something about his demeanor made her uneasy. Arrogance, she thought. The kind that makes men dangerous, not just in the ring, but outside of it too. Near her, two mothers whispered. "Sensei Tyler is tough," one said, "but he gets results. My son got his brown belt way faster than expected." "Yeah, he definitely commands attention," the other murmured, flinching as Tyler corrected another student with more force than necessary. 20 minutes later, Chloe jogged over, her cheeks flushed from exertion. "Ready to go, Mom? I just need to grab my water bottle," she said, bouncing with post-training energy. "Of course, honey. How was it today?" "Good. Sensei Tyler showed us some new combos. He thinks I might be ready for my green belt next month." Rebecca beamed with quiet pride. Chloe had come so far, growing stronger in both body and spirit since starting martial arts. It was worth every dime spent on monthly tuition. As they gathered Chloe's things, a sudden voice boomed across the dojo. "All right, before we wrap up, who wants to see something fun?" Tyler called out, grinning like a showman. The room fell into a confused hush. That wasn't part of the usual routine. Rebecca's stomach tightened. Something felt off. Then Tyler's gaze swept the crowd and landed squarely on her. His grin widened, sharp, almost predatory. "You know what?" he continued. "I think we need a quick demo, to show why untrained folks should never challenge a martial artist." There were murmurs now, a few uneasy glances. This wasn't normal. "Mom, let's just go," Chloe whispered, clutching her mother's arm. But Tyler was already striding toward them, his steps exaggerated and theatrical. Other parents began shifting uncomfortably, unsure if this was a joke or something more serious. Rebecca rose slowly, instincts flaring. She had a feeling this wouldn't end the way Tyler thought. He stopped in front of her, towering nearly a foot taller, clearly relishing the attention. The entire room had fallen silent. Even the giggling teens from earlier now watched with wide eyes. "Ma'am," Tyler said loudly, making sure every ear could hear him. "I don't believe we've met. You're Chloe's mom, right?" "That's right," Rebecca answered, steady and calm. "Well," Tyler grinned without warmth, "since you're here watching, ever been curious about martial arts yourself?" Rebecca felt Chloe's hand slip into hers, nervous, damp. "Not particularly," she replied, eyes never leaving his. But Tyler wasn't done. Not even close. Tyler wasn't done with his performance. If anything, he leaned in deeper, his tone theatrical now, as though he were auditioning for a role instead of running a dojo. "Let me guess," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "You've probably watched all those Hollywood action flicks and thought to yourself, I could do that, right? Happens all the time." A few uneasy chuckles rippled across the mats, but Rebecca noticed the shift in atmosphere. Parents glanced away. Students grew still. No one was quite sure if this was a joke anymore or something darker unfolding in plain sight. "I actually haven't," Rebecca replied coolly, never breaking eye contact. "We should be heading out. Chloe's got homework." But Tyler stepped forward again, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal while still projecting. "Come on, just a friendly demonstration. Nothing serious. A quick spar. Show everyone here the difference between wishful thinking and actual training." Chloe's face turned pale. "Sensei Tyler, my mom doesn't—" "It's okay, sweetheart," Rebecca said gently, though her jaw had clenched just slightly. Tyler clapped his hands together. The sharp sound cracked across the room, making several parents flinch. "Excellent," he beamed. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson, is it? I'll go easy on you. Wouldn't want to hurt someone who's never thrown a punch." His smirk dripped with arrogance. The dojo fell deeper into an uncomfortable silence. Students shuffled awkwardly. Some looked embarrassed, others were visibly entertained. A few younger boys even whispered to one another like this was a spectacle worth watching. "This isn't necessary," Rebecca said, her voice like stone, level, unwavering. "Oh, but it is," Tyler insisted, pacing slowly like a ringmaster before a show. "See? We've got a generation of people thinking they're tough because of what they see on TV. But real combat, real training, that takes grit. Not just suburban mom yoga classes." The insult landed hard. A few parents looked down. One or two gave Rebecca apologetic glances but said nothing. Tyler had turned the dojo into his stage, and no one dared interrupt the star. Rebecca felt something shift inside her. Not anger. Not yet. But a sensation she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long, long time. A controlled stillness, the prelude to focus. A presence she had buried. Tyler was still grinning. What's the worst that could happen, right? A couple light moves, maybe a takedown. Consider it a free lesson in humility. Rebecca looked at Chloe. Her daughter's face was a blend of panic and disbelief. Then she looked back at Tyler, who was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. "One condition," Rebecca said softly. Tyler's grin faltered. "Oh yeah? What's that?" "When this is over, you apologize to your students for all of this." His laugh rang out, mocking and cruel. "Apologize? Lady, you'll be the one saying sorry to the floor when it breaks your fall." More students cringed, but Rebecca's expression never changed. Instead, she simply nodded, slipped off her jacket, and revealed arms that were sculpted, disciplined, arms forged by years of training, not fitness fads. "Mom," Chloe whispered desperately, "you don't have to prove anything. Rebecca gave her hand a squeeze. Sometimes you do, honey. Sometimes people like this need to be reminded that strength doesn't always come with noise. And then she stepped forward. Something changed. Her posture, her movement, the tired shuffle of a modest mother disappeared. In its place, fluid, deliberate motion. Her steps were precise, controlled. Anyone paying attention would have seen it. Tyler didn't. He was too busy adjusting his belt, grinning at his audience. "All right, folks," he boomed. "Gather round. Let's make this educational." What Tyler didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that Rebecca Thompson hadn't always been Rebecca Thompson. Years ago, she'd been known around the world as Rebecca Chen, a 3-time mixed martial arts world champion. From 19 to 25, she dominated the combat circuit, earning the nickname Silent Storm for her eerie calm and ruthless precision in the cage. She didn't just win, she dismantled. But her career had ended not in defeat, but in heartbreak. Her younger brother, also a fighter, had died in a car crash on the way to one of her championship bouts. He'd been racing to be there, racing to support her. He never made it. The guilt had crushed her. She vanished from the spotlight. No press releases, no farewell fights. She walked away from titles, sponsors, and the only identity she'd ever known. She started over as Rebecca Thompson, moving to a quiet town, raising her daughter alone, choosing peace over pain. Until now. Now, standing in the center of a gym she never planned to enter, staring down a cocky black belt in front of an audience that didn't know the storm was about to break. She could feel it all returning. The stance, the breath control, the weight shift in her heels. And Tyler? He had no clue what was coming. She had sworn to never fight again. After her brother's death, Rebecca had left everything behind, the titles, the fans, the adrenaline. She'd changed her name to her mother's maiden name, moved across the country, and started fresh as a quiet graphic designer. For 13 long years, she honored that vow. No sparring, no violence, just art, motherhood, and healing. But now, standing in this fluorescent-lit dojo with her daughter watching, and a smirking fool mocking everything she stood for, the fire inside her stirred. Not out of ego or ambition, but out of principle. This wasn't about pride. It was about respect. "You ready, Mrs. Thompson?" Tyler called from across the mat, bouncing on his heels like a show-off at a school talent show. Rebecca didn't answer right away. She centered herself, grounding her breath, feeling every muscle in her body recalibrate. Around the room, the crowd grew quieter. Something was shifting. They couldn't name it, but they could feel it. "Just remember, folks," Tyler declared proudly, "this is why serious training matters. You can't fake experience." The irony was almost comical. Rebecca had gone toe-to-toe with Olympic medalists. She'd beaten international champions. She had bled, broken bones, and faced fear in its rawest form. And now she was standing in front of a man who thought cardio kickboxing made him a warrior. Tyler strutted closer, cocky as ever. "Any last words before we begin?" he asked with theatrical bravado. Rebecca finally looked him straight in the eyes, and something in that look made him falter. Just for a second. Because what stared back at him wasn't a mother. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hesitation. It was the quiet, calculating stillness of someone who had spent years becoming lethal, and knew exactly how to use it. "Yes," she said softly. Her voice didn't rise, but somehow it filled the entire room. "You might want to remember," and that's when it truly sank in. This hadn't been luck. This wasn't a fluke. This had been a lesson. She wasn't trying to beat Tyler. She was trying to teach everyone watching that true strength doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to dominate. It needs to protect, to humble, and to choose wisely. Chloe stepped onto the mat now, her voice trembling slightly but proud as ever. My mom, she used to be Rebecca Chen, she said. She was a 3-time world champion. She stopped competing when I was little. The silence grew even heavier, and then, like a wave breaking, students began pulling out their phones. A moment later, gasps followed. Articles, highlight reels, pictures of a younger Rebecca standing atop global podiums, knockout victories, submission wins, Hall of Fame interviews. Tyler's expression shifted through denial, shock, embarrassment, and finally, something resembling humility. He turned slowly, looking at his students. Their eyes weren't mocking. They were simply waiting for truth, for leadership, for him to become better than the man who started this mess. Tyler began, then paused, swallowed hard, and tried again. I owe you an apology, he said to Rebecca, and I owe them one too. He looked at his students now. This wasn't teaching, he said quietly. This was bullying, and that's not who I want to be. Rebecca gave a small nod. The strongest thing you can ever do is admit when you're wrong. Your students will respect you more for it, not less. Tyler nodded slowly, then turned to face his class properly, his voice stronger now. Everyone, I made a serious mistake today, and I've got a lot of learning to do. From now on, we train with honor, not ego, with humility, not showmanship. That's a promise. The dojo remained quiet for a beat. Then, someone clapped. Another joined. And slowly the room filled with applause, not for the fall, but for the lesson. Rebecca gathered her jacket, gently took Chloe's hand, and together they walked out of the dojo. Not in triumph, not in victory, but in quiet, dignified peace. Because the real strength wasn't in winning a fight, it was in knowing when to walk away. To someone who didn't know what to look for, Rebecca might have seemed passive, almost vulnerable. But anyone with even a whisper of combat knowledge would have seen it. The stillness of a coiled spring, the calm before a precision strike. She wasn't hesitating. She was calculating. Tyler, oblivious, kept pacing, his voice still dripping with self-satisfaction. You see, real martial arts takes years, decades to master. You can't just pull up a few YouTube videos and think you're ready for real combat. You're absolutely right, Rebecca replied evenly. There was something odd in her tone, a calm so grounded it sent a shiver through the room. Heads turned, a few parents straightened in their seats. Even Tyler blinked, confused by her agreement. Exactly, he said, clearly taken off guard. So maybe we just... No, Rebecca said gently, her voice like silk over steel. You wanted to teach a lesson about real martial arts. Let's teach one. The certainty in her voice rippled across the dojo like a wave of cold air. Tyler's instincts screamed at him that something was off, but pride is a powerful blinder. Fine, he growled, squaring his shoulders, sinking into a stance that looked impressive, if a little too dramatic. Just don't say I didn't warn you. He launched in with a clean right cross, fast, well-formed, delivered with force and full confidence. It was the kind of punch that had earned him easy victories against less experienced opponents. It never even brushed her. Rebecca stepped aside with the grace of falling snow. Just one subtle shift of her weight, and Tyler's fist cut through air where her head had been a moment before. It was so fluid, so minimal, that some in the room weren't even sure she'd moved. Tyler stumbled, thrown off balance by the emptiness his punch struck. His brow furrowed in disbelief. That punch always landed. "Lucky dodge," he muttered, resetting his stance. "Won't happen again." Rebecca didn't answer. She simply returned to her centered stance, still as a statue, calm as a pond. This time, Tyler unleashed a full combination: jab, cross, hook, each thrown with textbook form, confidence, and increasing aggression. But Rebecca danced through the strikes like smoke between fingers. Her movements weren't flashy or wild. They were efficient, subtle, and terrifyingly effective. She dipped just enough, slid just wide, tilted just slightly, and every punch missed. Not by much, but enough. Enough to embarrass a man used to controlling every fight he entered. Around the dojo, the atmosphere changed. Gone was the nervous laughter. Gone was the anticipation of a funny mismatch. Now there was silence. A thick, electric stillness as realization crept in. Something incredible was happening. Even the youngest white belts sensed it. The parents leaned forward without meaning to. The teenage students held their breath. Tyler's confidence began to bleed. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, not from effort, but from fear. "Stand still and fight," he barked, and lunged into another flurry, desperate, wild. Rebecca remained poised, unshaken, and something else was happening now. With each dodge, she moved a fraction closer. A half step. A quarter turn. She wasn't just evading anymore. She was closing the distance, slowly, strategically, without letting him realize until it was too late. "She's making him tired," one teen whispered. "She's controlling the fight," another muttered. Tyler, red-faced and panting now, threw a wild haymaker, a sloppy full-force swing. Rebecca slipped beneath it like it was telegraphed in slow motion. And then, finally, she touched him. Just a single feather-light tap to his ribs as he spun past her. No pain, no force, but enough to make a point. "I could have broken you. I chose not to." Tyler staggered, turning sharply to face her, his face flushed with both exhaustion and disbelief. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "Fight back." Rebecca tilted her head slightly. "I am fighting," she said softly. "I'm just choosing how." The words struck harder than any punch, because in that moment, everyone understood. She wasn't avoiding the fight. She was teaching. She wasn't scared. She was in control. She wasn't trying to win. She was showing mercy. The entire room stood still, watching the truth unfold, not through words, but through silence, breath, and the quiet dominance of a master who didn't need to prove anything, but chose to remind everyone anyway. Rebecca wasn't just dodging anymore. She was demonstrating a level of control none of them had ever witnessed before. Every movement, every breath, was precise and deliberate. Tyler, now drenched in sweat and gasping for air, made one final desperate move. He dropped low, then lunged forward, using his wrestling background to attempt a takedown. On paper, it was smart. Close the distance, bring the fight to the ground, use his size and weight where it counted. But it was the worst possible decision against someone like Rebecca. Because as he surged forward, she didn't sprawl or retreat. She stepped into the attack. The watching crowd barely processed what happened next. Rebecca's hands found the back of Tyler's head and shoulder, with a dancer's grace and a warrior's timing. With what looked like the gentlest motion, she redirected his own momentum forward and downward. It was so fluid, so surreal. It almost seemed like she wasn't fighting him at all, just guiding him into his own defeat. Tyler's body slammed into the mat face first with a thud that echoed across the now silent dojo. Gasps filled the air. Whispers followed. One mother instinctively covered her mouth. A few students actually took a step backward. Tyler lay still for several seconds, stunned. Not just from the impact, but from the impossibility of what had just happened. He had been the aggressor. He had all the strength, the size, the momentum. And now he was face down on the mat while his opponent stood calmly above him, barely winded. He looked up in confusion, blinking at her like she'd broken the laws of physics. "How?" he managed, breathless. "How did you do that?" Rebecca reached down and offered him a hand. 13 years of practice. Before I ever walked into this dojo. He stared at her hand for a long second, then ignored it, pushing himself up with a grunt. His pride had been cracked wide open and the room had seen it all. Around them, the students watched with wide, blinking eyes, the kind of silence that only follows something truly unforgettable. That's not possible," Tyler mumbled, still in denial. You're just a mom, a regular person." Rebecca's voice was gentle but clear, resonating with every ear in the room. "No," she said. "I'm someone who chose to step away from fighting so I could raise my daughter. But that doesn't mean I forgot who I was. The strongest people are usually the ones who don't have to prove it." For the first time, Tyler's smirk faltered. But he pushed forward anyway. His pride wouldn't allow anything else. "All right then," he huffed. "Let's get this over with." He began stretching in grand, exaggerated motions, high kicks, deep lunges, shadow punches slicing the air like some over-rehearsed movie villain. The students watched in silence, half thrilled, half unnerved. Parents exchanged concerned glances, whispers rising like fog. "This doesn't feel right." She agreed to it, though. "Still, he's the instructor. What are we supposed to do?" Rebecca ignored them all. She shut her eyes briefly and let herself slip into that ancient rhythm. The rhythm of precision, of instinct, of controlled power. When her eyes opened again, she wasn't Rebecca Thompson anymore. She was Rebecca Chen, Silent Storm. Her posture shifted, her stance rooted, her energy focused. And if anyone in that room had truly known what to look for, they'd have realized they were no longer watching a demonstration. They were watching a predator awaken. Even Tyler noticed the change, though he couldn't make sense of it. "What is this? You've taken some self-defense classes, huh? A little Krav Maga on the weekends?" "Something like that," Rebecca replied, her voice neutral. "Well, whatever it is," Tyler sneered, circling her now, "won't help. Weekend warrior training doesn't hold up in real combat." He kept talking, still performing, still trying to control the room with volume and bravado. "Kids, pay attention. This is what happens when people think they can do what we do. Real combat isn't glamorous, it's brutal. And this little fantasy ends in pain." Rebecca didn't move. She stood in the center like stone, tracking him with nothing but the turn of her head, perfectly calm, perfectly still. Chloe stood at the edge of the mats, clutching her backpack to her chest, whispering again, "Mom, you don't have to do this." But deep down, she knew. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about teaching a lesson the dojo would never forget.